we'll go into the lights.
Hi. I really just want to pick up on something that I feel is kind of running around underneath this conversation, and I would just love if a little bit more energy and space was given to it generally in Scotland. I feel we're talking an awful lot here just now about structures and responsibilities and funding and all that kind of stuff, but I think that what actually potentially makes the difference here, and particularly makes the difference when you're talking about better outcomes, is actually behaviours. And I think that Angela alluded a little bit to that, about the different ways in which different relationships are trying to be nurtured between politicians and also between politicians and civil servants. But I think that it really harks back to the point that Leslie Riddoch made this morning about the fact that really a lot of the change that we want to make and are capable of making will depend upon behaviours, and it's all of our behaviours, but particularly the behaviours of people who have power and who have authority at the moment. And I just think that I would withhold my vote from everybody really, because I don't really want to hear about the structural changes, I want to hear about the behavioural changes.
Anybody want to pick up on that aspect about behaviour?
I suppose the thing I would probably clarify, do I think politicians need to grow up and learn a bit? Yeah, I think they absolutely do. You know, I can take you into any West of Scotland council and you'll hear them talking about, it's mine, it's my responsibility. They're not prepared to let go. And there is tough wars there, it's about political struggle, and I think we need to be more strategic in our outlook, and we also need to look beyond a 4-year term. We need to make decisions now that will be there for 30 years, in terms of education and other things as well. So, I do think politicians need to learn a lot more and be more strategic in the way they think.
And hopefully with multi-member wards, because you come to the end of it's my ward.
I disagree with that.
And it's shared. You share the responsibility for representing that area. It's difficult in terms of internal competition.
In practice, I think the idea of sharing a multi-member ward hasn't reached some of the parts of the West of Scotland that I frequent. I think it's a competition to see who can get more ward inquiries, who can go to more community council meetings. It is a competition. It's about not passing on the letter to tell them that, by the way, you've got a meeting somewhere, but that's what I meant by growing up a bit, and being a bit more strategic. I think we're not there yet.
We'll come and do a session in the West and we'll get it sponsored by Hagan.
Stephen. Well, I'll just make a comment on what the lady said there about behaviour, and I totally agree with you on that. The problem is that at a local level, the structures we have in place at the minute doesn't allow us to behave as we'd like to behave. And that's what I'm saying. Whatever you are, get rid of all this governance stuff and let us have the structures that we want so we can actually deliver the best services to the people that we serve. And I think that's what we're all probably trying to do.
Angela, finally.
I think it's a really valid point, and one of the key things that we've been seeing both as executives within the local authorities and with elected members is that we've made a decision. It's a courageous decision, so we need to stick with it. And so one of the behaviours is that constant reinforcement that this is now the start of a new way of working. We don't have a blueprint, we've never done it before, and there's a bit of what we're calling pragmatic incrementalism as we go through. And there's sometimes we've had a lot of discussion with the trade unions where we've wanted to do one thing and they're saying absolutely not, this is the way that we have to do it, and it is a bit of a trade-off. And I think you're right, it is about relationship, building trust, and a bit of well, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll be brave enough to admit to that and we'll take a step back and we'll try something else. Okay, it's vote time again. So if you're at the ready, 1, 2, 3. Those in favour of Iain's pitch on amalgamation and one councils. Well, again, almost unanimous, and a brave dissenter in the middle there. Can I just ask, on the brave dissenter? I did say brave dissenter.
Thank you. It sounded to me as what I was picking up was that this was a sort of an ideological viewpoint that shared services are necessarily good, and that's something that just doesn't sit particularly easy with me when you're talking about it being implemented across the board in the way that I thought I was hearing.
Right. So my answer to that will be read the follow-up in the Herald tomorrow. Hopefully we'll read some more detail. Okay, can we thank Iain for his pitch? Okay, next up Jim MacDonald. Jim is going to move the agenda on slightly to a different concept, but part of the same rationale in terms of sharing service and the like, but from a place-based perspective. Jim.
Thanks, Ross. Experience tells us, and history reminds us, that city regions, which is what I'm going to talk about, are key drivers, key elements of national economies. And what I don't want to describe is structural change around reorganising a la Strathclyde region, or indeed any form of reorganisation. What I want to talk about is the way that city regions within Scotland, within Europe, operate to deliver services, to deliver the kind of life, the kind of place that their communities want, and by doing so support the country as a whole. The key, and we've heard some language which is typical of these kind of events throughout the morning, and I've indeed been responsible for much of that. Process, structure, financial efficiency, outcomes. I think we've heard a little bit less about vision, and one of the things which can help gel, align, point in the right direction all sorts of different public services, all sorts of different public servants with different day-to-day jobs to do, is a shared vision. City regions provide a framework for doing that, and there are lots of lessons that we can draw from around Europe. Happily, there are also lessons we can begin to draw from right here in Scotland. My organisation, Architecture+Design Scotland, has been lucky enough to work with colleagues in Dundee and the Dundee City Region authorities on developing their strategic plan, and that is admittedly within a planning context. But the key thing for me in doing that work has been the desire to find a different way of delivering, which is what is essentially a spatial vision, as part of a way of delivering for that wider community. And it goes to the heart of dealing with some of the competition issues that you'll have from anything from individual streets and communities right through to countries. But it tries to broker solutions which are in the wider common benefit. And the key thing which ties that is a vision. What kind of place do we want to live in? What kind of place do we want to be? What kind of people do we want to be? And the key from that is that it doesn't then rely on enormous structural change. I mean, I'm just about old enough to remember regionalisation in the 1970s, and certainly old enough to remember it being dismantled in the 1990s. The danger is if we embark headlong on a restructure approach, we waste an enormous amount of energy setting something out without dealing with the vision thing. What is it that those services are trying to provide? So in terms of the way that the city regions can work and the lessons that we can draw from within Scotland, it's to get all of the collaborators together, all of the stakeholders, dreaded word, together, to decide what kind of place do they want. And the lovely thing about that is it can be different in different parts of Scotland because they're different. It doesn't need to be one size fits all. It doesn't need to be the amalgamation of councils. It can be loose fit collaboration. It can be tight knit shared service. It can be a range of things that those regions and areas want. Why do we want this? Because again, one of the things I've noticed over the 20 years I've been working in this sector is that we keep coming back to the same conversations. Why do we heard this morning about the Tesco issue. Why do we build supermarkets that apparently nobody wants but everybody uses? Why do we build settlements on the edges of our towns that everybody hates but everybody ends up living in? There's a reason for that. The reason is we don't have an alternative vision. So stuff just happens. So the idea that I would posit is that by working fiendishly hard, by working toward a common objective, we can achieve a lot. But without a vision to drive that, it may all not produce what we want.
Thank you, Jim. So, city region concept, vision, strength of purpose and direction, and that essential discussion to have at the local level of the role and the function of place. What kind of place do we want to live in? What kind of place do we want to work in? And where do we want to spend our leisure time? So, on the city region concept, any questions from the audience?
Hi, Graham Bell. I think after the 4th City Region Conference I went to in Edinburgh, I decided I would never go again because we had not moved on 1 single inch. I went to a follow-up meeting in Lindley, at which the Chief Executive of West Lothian Council declared over his dead body would he be part of Edinburgh City Region. Now, one of the magnificent achievements of Manchester was to get all those local authorities to agree to be part of a single body and to share the richness of their heritage and their vision and what they were doing together under the label Manchester, a word which could be understood in Chicago or Shanghai. Lindley, not dead big in Chicago or Shanghai. And also, think about numbers of people here. Greater Manchester has a bigger population than Scotland, and they can do everything together under one banner and market it well. That's grand, but it seems that we're not getting there. And one of the reasons we're not getting there is because how do you make the rim and the spokes as valuable as the hub? You know, I live in a region in which people say, still to this day, and they mean it, a day out of hike is a day wasted. There's vision for you, not. And yet, I also, apart from enjoying living in the borders, do a great deal of work in Edinburgh and in Scotland as a whole. And I don't see that we're on a level playing field, and I don't see that anybody has articulated a vision which makes somebody in Hawick feel as comfortable that they're part of that vision as somebody in Morningside. And how do we address that?